In this lesson, we'll talk about using Z-spheres to create some custom base geometry in ZBrush. So a great thing about ZBrush is the fact that there are so many ways to create your base geometry to work from, and Z-spheres are one of those ways that we can create some custom geometry beyond just the simple primitives that we've looked at. So the first thing that we'll do is select an actual Z-sphere. So go into our tool palette, select the Z-sphere. It's just kind of this half red, dark, and light sphere, so you can kind of tell which direction's which. And we'll draw it onto the canvas here and go to edit mode. So here we have a Z-sphere. Now the Z-sphere is not going to do too much by itself. What we want to do is start to add more Z-spheres to this one and create some sort of a network. So if we're thinking about a body, or in our case we're going to be creating a little worm creature, so we might want to use this as a base. So I'm going to turn on symmetry in the X so we can kind of see the two sides here. Okay, and this will also allow you to see right when you're on the center, so that when that snaps together you know you're in the middle. So we're still in edit mode and draw mode. So now what we want to do is add Z-sphere. So I'm going to draw right on top of this Z-sphere, and you can see we've created a new Z-sphere. I'll go to move, and this will allow us to move it around. And so I can go ahead and move it up, come to the side, move it over. You can see that we have now two Z-spheres, one here and one here, and they're linked by all of these link spheres. So we can't select the individual link spheres, but we can, if we wanted to, convert those into new Z-spheres. So just think of these Z-spheres as kind of like the joints, and then these are sort of the bones of the limbs of this model. Okay, we can come in here to the back side. Let's add another Z-sphere coming back here. We can also start to scale them. So selecting that, we can scale the Z-sphere. You can see how those link spheres still follow. We can also go to rotate, and I can select the actual chain here and rotate that if we want to manipulate it that way. We can come in here and we'll kind of scale this up. So let's add a few more Z-spheres to the mix. We'll come back here and start to add a few more. Let's kind of move this one out a little bit. Now let's say that we've now moved this out. We want to be able to add another joint in here. So we'll go back to draw, and I'm going to, go ahead and click, on one of those Z-spheres, or one of those link spheres rather, and it'll convert it into a new Z-sphere, which we can then move up. Okay, we can go ahead and kind of scale it down. Now right now this isn't actual geometry. We'll look at in a second how we can make this into our base geometry. But right now we're just kind of setting this up. Maybe add another one right in here. We want it to kind of taper a little bit. We'll kind of pick that up a little. I want it to kind of sit on the ground, kind of like that. Okay, and if we want to maybe add another one, right up here. If you wanted to add eyes, you could add them like that. You can see the symmetry will help you do that. In our case, I don't want to do that yet. Okay, let me go ahead and scale this up. Kind of move it out a little bit. So something like that. It doesn't have to be exact. Just kind of play around with it a little bit. The idea is to create this sort of network of these Z-spheres. Now once we get our kind of network built out, at any time you want to preview what the geometry is going to look like, you can hit A on your keyboard, and that is going to preview this as an adaptive skin. And so you can see it's kind of just a polygon model that's being skinned around those Z-spheres. Okay. Now the settings for your adaptive skin are going to be located down here under this adaptive skin subpalette. So you can see as I hit A, this preview turns on, and it's actually previewing 2 levels. So the density here is defining how many subdivision levels are we going to preview. So if I go to 3, you can see that that's a more smoothed out version, and when you actually create your adaptive skin, you'll have those levels. If I go down to 1, it's very low res. Okay, that's the lowest, basically the lowest level. So we'll keep it at least 2. Okay, you can also come up here and change your global radial density, and you can kind of have a little bit more control over the resolution of that. Now there's also an older skinning version where you can turn that on, and you can see you get a little bit of a different result, and you have some settings here as well. We have some training on working with Z-spheres, and if you want to go through that, it'll take you a little bit more in depth into all of these. But for now, we'll go ahead and turn off classic skinning, and we'll just use the new skinning because we just want a nice clean mesh here. Now, once you have decided, okay, you know, I like the mesh, but I need to manipulate this a little bit. So let me go ahead and pull down this Z-spheres down to the floor just to make sure that they're, you know, sitting on the ground. Once you've got it previewed and you like it, then you can say, okay, make adaptive skin. Now, it's not going to look like anything has happened, but if you go into your tool palette and you go into the pop-up, you'll see that we now have a skin underscore Z-sphere 1. So if I select that skin, this is the actual polygon geometry. So now if I were to go in here and let's go into geometry, you can see that I output it at that density of 2, and so there's 2 subdivision levels. If you want to get rid of that and make this the lowest level, you can go ahead and delete lower, and now you're just at the base. Now from here, the idea is we now have a piece of base geometry that we can start sculpting. So you can come in here with move and turn symmetry back on, and we can start to come in and modify this. So you get kind of a larger draw size here, and you can start to, you know, manipulate this and modify it however you want to. And this is your new sort of base geometry. Kind of pull this out a little bit and do whatever sort of kind of shaping that you want. Just begin sculpting. So Z-spheres are a really powerful way to begin creating that base geometry that you're going to need. So you're not always going to be able to just start with a primitive shape. A lot of times you're going to have to create something a little bit more complex, and Z-spheres are great for that, especially for characters where you're building out arms and legs and other kinds of, you know, limbs, the head, and so forth. The Z-spheres are going to be great for doing that, and then you just convert that to an adaptive skin and begin doing your sculpting on that. Okay, so that's a quick look at using Z-spheres along with adaptive skins to begin building out some of your base geometry. So the next thing that we want to talk about is something that's very important, and that is a little bit more in-depth look at subtools. So we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to go through in a little bit more detail how we can sort of organize our subtools, how we can add new subtools, and kind of some ways that we can manipulate those subtools and dealing with those. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that next.